Now we're going to move on to the Kamala Harris story here. So there's something else that was released. This one came from Ryan Grimm too. I guess Ryan's kind of been on a roll, but there was a new poll that was released about Kamala Harris's campaign that I think you guys should see. This is a YouGov poll. Now, first, I want to show you what YouGov said when Kamala was announced as the candidate. I want to show you how things definitely took a different turn.
So a new YouGov poll sponsored by Yahoo has just dropped, and we see a major shift for Kamala Harris from July, when she was the presumptive-ish kind of nominee for Democratic Party, to post-debate. So this is a post-debate poll that was done between the 11th and 13th of September, so all post-debate. It is a large sample size with a very small margin of error, 2.3% margin of error. And in this poll, we see Kamala Harris is now at 50% of the vote compared to Donald Trump's 45% in a two-way race, whereas this number was tied 46-46 back in July. So we've seen this major change over time, giving Kamala Harris more of a bump, and especially a post-debate bump. Now, even though she has this bump, I want to go more into her favorability ratings, because I was watching James Carville yesterday on Bill Kristol's show, and he talked about a convention bump, and he's like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a horse race bump. It can be a bump in favorability and likability and trusting the candidate more on certain issues. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit more about these bumps that we see post-debate, particularly where Kamala Harris was in July, where she is now as far as her favorability rating. Now,
so this is what they were telling people. And I kept telling you that I didn't believe any of this. Remember, I kept telling you when I talked to people, they continued to tell me that they were not interested in participating in this election at all. And they definitely weren't going to vote for her. But I just want to remind you what they said. So we get to this YouGov poll right about here.
2022, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are on the ballot. So let's go ahead and look at Kamala Harris's favorability changes over time. So as we can see, overall, she has gone from a 40% favorability rating to a 49% favorability rating. Now, I don't have unfavorable, but this is above water. So in a day where almost every politician is below water, she is above water. Now, of men, this is a huge shift.
Now, this was September, right? September, they showed her at 49% overall, 46% with men. See how she had increased 51% with women, 43% with white people. This was the YouGov poll. And this is when some people were like, oh my God, she's got this in the bag. She's going to win this by a landslide. And I was like, have you talked to people in this country? You sure about this?
She has gone from 36% favorability rating to 46, a 10% bump. Now, if we look at women, we see that the bump is 8%. It's not as big as men, but it's still pretty significant. Now, amongst white voters, we also see an 8% bump. So we see these momentous shifts happening with some very important groups for the Democrats to kind of peel off of the Republicans, especially male voters and white voters. That male number going up 10% and her being at 46. Donald Trump in the same one is at 49. If we look at that crosstab, that's definitely within the margin of error of that crosstab. This is an important number for Kamala Harris. All right, so when we look at Hispanic voters, we see a huge 13% jump from 38% to 51%. We're going to talk about why that is very important in a few minutes, but I mean, obviously, look at the number. You can just tell it is very important. In the next one, independents, we have 30 to 47%, a 17% shift. Registered voters, we see a shift. And with Biden voters, because a lot of people, when Kamala Harris was being talked about back in July, they didn't really know. They were still kind of in their wishy-washy, we need to have Biden for some reason. Those numbers have gone up by 12.
Okay. So take a look at this, fam. They were bragging about her support among Hispanic voters, independents, registered voters, and in particular, this group here, the Biden voters. That part's going to be incredibly important when we get to the Ryan Grimm article, because number one, she lost the Hispanic vote. So I don't know what YouGov was talking about, but she lost the Hispanic vote. She lost a significant portion, and this is something I want to show you. The Biden voters, where it said 81% in July, then it jumped up to 93% in September. Don't forget, there were millions of people that voted for Biden in 2020 that did not show up to vote at all. So at this point in time, they were trying to convince you guys that she was going to run away with this baby. And then as it became closer to November, then they said, oh, it's going to be really tight. It's going to be really tight. It's going to be too close to call, too close to call. Like, you know, that's to encourage you to come out and support. So now it is being revealed also by YouGov that now Gaza was complicit. Gaza was a big part of why some of the people who voted for Biden didn't come out and vote for her. And a number of people continued to tell me this didn't matter much. But I think what they overlooked were the people who did come out and vote for Biden, but failed to return and vote for her. Don't remember? Let's just have a quick reminder of what that looked like. Remember when she said this?
Please do check out Project 2025. Because I'm telling you, it is a plan. It is a plan to weaken America's middle class. Project 2025, if he is elected. I'm here because we believe in democracy. Everyone's voice matters, but I am speaking now. I am speaking now. So Project 2025, look, if he is elected, Donald Trump intends to give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations. He intends to cut Social Security and Medicare. He intends to surrender our fight against the climate crisis, and he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
Yeah, so I think we all remember that. And she was speaking then, but she is not speaking anymore. And so we wanted to take a look at that to show you how we got to this particular place today. Now, that YouGov poll I was telling you about, it says that Kamala Harris paid the price for not breaking with Biden on Gaza. New poll shows 29% of non-voters who supported Biden in 2020 said the U.S. support for the genocide was the top reason they sat the 2024 election out, according to the survey by YouGov. So that 29% of voters that did support Joe Biden, that could have made up some of that difference there with the numbers. That still doesn't mean that she would have won, but that could have made up some of that difference. Don't forget, like Michigan was a big one, and they have the largest Arab American population. And, you know, they heavily came out against, no, we're not supporting you. You're killing our people. And rightfully so. So for the people who kept saying, don't worry about it, just try to get Republicans. It says here from 2020 to 2024, Democrats saw a staggering drop off in support at the presidential level, with some 19 million people who voted for Biden staying home or not mailing in their ballots in 2024. Now, a new survey conducted by YouGov suggests that Biden's support for Israel unrelenting assault on Gaza played a surprisingly large role in the choice of those previous Biden supporters not to vote. Now, I wish that those voters would have come out and supported like third party who was correct on that issue. But unfortunately, they decided not to come out and vote at all. And then there were some that decided to vote for Donald Trump because they wanted to punish the Democratic Party for that genocide. It goes on to say here, the top reason those non-voters cited above the economy at 24% and immigration at 11% was Gaza. A full 29% cited the ongoing onslaught of the top reason they didn't cast a vote in 2024. Looking narrowly at states that swung from Biden in 2020 to Trump in 2024, the number is smaller, but in those states, 20% still cited Gaza as the reason they did not vote again. They did not vote again. So the Democratic Party was willing to lose just to give Israel what they want. Just to put Israel first. They were willing to lose, which is what I said before. Remember, they really want to fundraise. They want to raise a lot of money. And apparently that threat from Kamala's speech when she said, you keep it up, you get Donald Trump. Apparently that threat wasn't threatening enough to the point that it scared that 29% of people to come out and support her anyway. New Year's Eve, I was in the bathroom, right? That's a bad way to start that off. New Year's Eve, when I was out for New Year's Eve, I went to the restroom and there were a couple of girls in the restroom. I overheard, not that I was eavesdropping, but I overheard like one of the women was saying, I couldn't do it. I couldn't vote for her. Okay, I was eavesdropping. I heard one of the women saying I couldn't vote for her. I just couldn't do it because of Gaza. There's no way I could do it. And I live in Massachusetts, honey. It's very blue. There are some red pockets, but for the most part, very blue. It goes on to say here, the poll was paid for by the Institute for Middle East Understanding Policy Project, which has been an outspoken critic of Israel's assault on Gaza. And you'll see the picture of Biden and Kamala there, looking just as sad as can be. Before firmly demonstrating that Gaza cost Democrats the election, it's important to keep a handful of caveats in mind. Even in October 7th and the resulting genocide had never happened, it's fair to assume some number of those non-voters still would not have voted and would have cited a different reason for not voting. Citing a top reason for not voting is far different than it being the only reason not to vote. And because the turnout drop-off was smaller in swing states, Gaza may not have been decisive on its own. Whenever surveys confirm views we already hold or tell us things we want to be true, it's worth approaching their findings with increased skepticism. Still, even the most biased poll can only manufacture so much of a response. Even if the true numbers aren't as stark as the survey found, it points in a clear direction. Biden's ruthless support for Israel's genocide and the refusal of the Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris to break with him hurt her among voters who stayed at home. And this was a big one. We said Kamala Harris had one job, and that was to break away from Biden, to explain to people how she would be different than Joe Biden. And that did not happen. I don't know if there's some type of loyalty there or whatever, but wouldn't have been me. And Joe Biden had no problem like shaming other people. You bet if it was the other way around, he probably would have no problem throwing her up under the bus. Okay. So that was a big, big, big mistake that Kamala did. And you can't point your fingers at all these other people. You can't point your fingers at the voters and blame them at the end of the day, which a lot of people in corporate media did. When in reality, it is on the candidates to convince the people why they are the best option and why you should come out and support them. It is not on the voter to to sway the candidate. The candidate is supposed to sway and convince the voter. And Kamala didn't do that. And that's how she ended up in the situation. It goes on to say here, a previous survey taken during the election by YouGov and also sponsored by the Institute for Middle East said they found strong evidence that Harris would be significantly boosted by breaking with Biden on Gaza and applying real pressure on Israel. But Harris chose not to do so. Breaking with Biden on Gaza could have had knock-on effects elsewhere, as Harris never successfully answered a question that dogged her throughout her campaign. What would she have done differently than Biden? Or what would she do differently in the future? Eventually, Harris settled on an unsatisfying answer. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden. She went on to say here when she was on The View, and I'm certainly not Donald Trump. She was also on The Late Show as well. However, it goes on to say here in other high profile interviews, she similarly declined to offer any answer as to what she would do differently other than be a different person. Of course, diverging from Biden on Gaza risked I jumped ahead too far. Losing voters who supported his policy. But a close look at the survey suggests that the risk was low compared to the potential reward. Voters who were with Biden in 2020 and stuck with Harris in 2024 were asked if breaking with him on Gaza would make them more or less enthusiastic about voting for Harris. By a 35-5 margin, they said doing so would have made them more enthusiastic to vote for her, with the remainder saying it would not have made a difference. So there's a couple of things that happened here. One was that Kamala Harris wasn't a strong candidate, which I had mentioned before. As much as we criticize Barack Obama today, at the time, Barack Obama was a strong candidate. We could at least look back and say that. And he was running on some pretty populist policies at that point in time, or for that point in time. We could at least say that. This time around, it's a little bit different because Trump won in 2016, but he didn't win the popular vote. And this time around, Kamala Harris, the Democrats lost the popular vote and Donald Trump won the popular vote. The Republicans haven't won the popular vote for the president since George W. Bush. So this really did send a message. And as I said before, the Democratic Party would have rather lost than come correct on this issue. And here's the other thing. This ceasefire proposal negotiation that just happened, as Biden and Kamala are trying to take the credit for that, right? And Biden said it's the same one that he had in May. If they were planning on just doing this on their own, why wasn't this mentioned? When Kamala Harris was running and she said, oh, we got to get a deal done. We got to get a deal done. But it's just January. And here we have the ceasefire negotiation. Now we'll get into Israel delaying things. But here we have a ceasefire negotiation because Donald Trump put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. But when Kamala Harris was running for president, it's not like Kamala said, we got something in the works. At the start of the year, this is going to get going. And they could have done it then. In fact, that would have most likely helped Kamala Harris's chances if they would have gone forward with that ceasefire deal before the election. But it did not happen because it wasn't a plan. They weren't planning on actually holding Benjamin Netanyahu accountable. That's what I want people to understand. This is all a game. It goes on to say, meanwhile, Democrats' unshakable commitment to the war also blended the concerns that the party was not focused on issues that matter to Americans, as I argued previously. And I want to show you this here. The issue factored most heavily in Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and less so in Pennsylvania. You'll see here, according to the survey. So it says here, 19% cited it as the top reason not to vote for Pennsylvania, 13% for Nevada, 6% for Georgia, 38% for Arizona, 6% for Georgia, 32% for Michigan, 13% for Nevada, 19% for Pennsylvania, and 32% for Wisconsin. So as you can see, Kamala lost Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona. May not have mattered as much in Georgia for her, but think about the difference it could have made in some of those states like Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin. You see what I mean? But they didn't want to do that. They didn't. That's significant. Also choosing not to meet with the Palestinian American community in Dearborn, Michigan. Big disaster. Because then Donald Trump went there to meet with them. And Kamala wouldn't even go meet with them. So this is why I'm trying to tell you guys, we have to start asking questions, looking outside the box, and just lining everything up in a row. And you can see how things are done over time. And then you just put it together. It's like one big puzzle. And then you see, were they really trying to fix this? No, they never were. I said that from the beginning. So it goes on to say here on January 12th, the Times of Israel published an interview with Jack Lew, Biden's ambassador to Israel, in which he acknowledged the impact of the administration's decisions on Gaza, standing with Israel these past 15 months with huge opposition in the media and parts of his own party. You could argue that it contributed to making his challenge for re-election insurmountable. And don't forget, when Biden was still in this race, let's not forget that the internal polls that they were seeing was showing that Donald Trump was going to get 400 electoral votes when Biden was still in the race. So do they want to win? Don't know, don't care. I think they just want to fundraise. But in the meantime, they were smiling in your face. And they knew that in order to win Michigan, they would have to win Dearborn. They would have to get the Detroit area. That's the most populous area there. And they weren't even trying. It was like they didn't care. Like, let's just talk to women about Roe v. Wade and let's hope that those numbers will come over and that will fix it. Turns out, not as many women saw that as a first important issue as they thought, which is what I tried to tell people. And if they would have interviewed people on the ground, everyday people within the community, they would have known this. So Gaza did have an impact for Kamala Harris, at least in reference to the people who supported Biden in 2020 and did not return in 2024. When I went to vote, there was nobody. Nobody. And I voted for Jill Stein. There was nobody. I've never seen that before. We don't usually have long, like enormous lines here in Massachusetts. But when I went to vote this year for the presidential election, there was nobody but me. I should have seen that as a sign, right? That the turnout wasn't going to be as much as they thought. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.